I died at 32 in a house I hated, next to a man I'd stopped loving years ago. The last thing I remember from that life was staring at the water-stained ceiling of the master bedroom, the bedroom Derek had insisted we needed, in the house he'd insisted we buy, with the FHA loan I'd qualified for because he'd already blown through his own credit. The irony wasn't lost on me, even as my heart gave out. The medication I couldn't afford because we were house poor, his phrase, said with a casual shrug like it wasn't his fault we'd stretched ourselves so thin, sat unopened on the nightstand. Then I woke up, 24 years old again, my phone alarm screaming. The date glowing on the screen, April 15th, 8 years earlier. I knew the date instantly. How could I forget? This was the day Derek was going to propose. The day I'd say yes, starry-eyed and stupid, thinking his attention meant love, thinking his big dreams meant he'd take care of me. The day that would set everything in motion. My hands shook as I sat up in my old studio apartment, the one I'd given up 6 months after we got engaged because Derek said living separately was a waste of money when we were planning a future together. The apartment I'd loved, hardwood floors, original 1920s details, a window that caught the morning sun just right. I'd forgotten how good it felt to wake up in a space that was entirely mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Running late, but don't worry, tonight's still on. Wear that blue dress. The blue dress. The one he'd bought me, 2 sizes too small, then acted hurt when I couldn't zip it. I just thought you'd want to make an effort, he'd said. I'd starved myself for 2 weeks to fit into it for that proposal dinner. I deleted his text and got in the shower. The water pressure was terrible. I'd forgotten that too, but I stood under it anyway, letting my mind race. If this was real, if I'd really been given a second chance, I needed to think. I needed to plan. In my first life, Derek had proposed at Marcello's, that overpriced Italian place he loved. I'd cried happy tears, I'd thought, and said yes. 3 months later, we'd gotten married at City Hall because he said big weddings were just for show, and we should invest in our future instead. By future, he'd meant the house. The house had been his obsession from the start. He worked in tech sales, made decent money, but he'd hemorrhaged cash on stupid things. A motorcycle he rode twice, a boat he kept docked at the marina, racking up fees. Failed cryptocurrency investments. By the time we got married, his credit score was in the low 500s. Mine was 780. We should buy, he'd said about 6 months after the wedding, during one of his motivational speaker moods where he paced the apartment gesturing wildly. We're throwing money away on rent. We need to build equity. We need to think long-term. I'd been hesitant. I'd only just paid off my student loans. I'd been saving, slowly building up a nest egg. But Derek had found the house, a massive 4-bedroom in the suburbs, way beyond what we needed, and fallen in love. I can't qualify for the mortgage, he'd admitted finally. Not with my credit. But you can. You're a first-time homebuyer. You can use an FHA loan, only 3.5% down. We can do this, babe. This is our dream. It wasn't my dream. My dream was that little craftsman bungalow near downtown that I'd driven past 100 times, with the window boxes and the front porch and the garden. But it was only 2 bedrooms, and Derek said it was too small to raise a family in, even though we'd never discussed having kids. So I'd let him talk me into it. I'd used my FHA loan eligibility, the one chance you get at a low down payment mortgage as a first-time buyer, on his dream house. A house that was always his, even though both our names were on the deed. He chose the furniture. He chose the paint colors. He invited his friends over without asking me. His mom had a key. And when the market crashed in 2020, when his sales job evaporated and the mortgage became crushing, he'd blamed me. You're the one who qualified for the loan, he'd said. You should have known we couldn't afford this. By the time I died, the house had been underwater for 2 years. We owed more than it was worth, and I'd been locked in. Because in that first life, I'd never built anything for myself. I'd put everything into his dreams, and when they failed, I had nothing to fall back on. I stepped out of the shower and wiped the mirror. Not this time. I called Derek at noon. Hey, babe. His voice was over-eager, performative. I could picture him at his desk, probably showing off to coworkers that he was talking to his girlfriend. What's up? Getting excited for tonight? I need to cancel. Silence. Then, what? Something came up. I can't make it to dinner. Mira. His tone shifted instantly, from cheerful to irritated. I made Reservations 3 weeks ago, at Marcello's. I knew, in my first life, he'd held that over my head for months, how much effort he'd put into planning the proposal, how special he'd tried to make it. I'm sorry, I said, and meant neither word. We can reschedule. Reschedule? He laughed, sharp and humorless. Are you serious right now? I took off work early. He stopped himself. You know what? Fine, whatever. I guess I'll just cancel everything. He hung up before I could respond. My hands weren't shaking anymore. He showed up at my apartment at 8 p.m. anyway. I'd expected this. Derek didn't handle rejection well. When things didn't go according to his plan, he'd show up to talk it out, which really meant talk at me until I apologized and gave him what he wanted. I answered the door in sweatpants and one of my old college t-shirts. We need to talk. He pushed past me without waiting for an invitation. His cologne, too strong, the same one he'd wear for the next 8 years, filled my small space. I'm tired, Derek. Yeah, well, I'm confused. He spun to face me. I planned this whole special evening and you just cancel? Via text? What the hell, Mira? I sat down on my couch, deliberately not offering him a seat. I told you something came up. What could possibly have come up that was more important than... He stopped himself again, and I knew why. He'd been about to say than me proposing, which would have ruined the surprise. In my first life, I'd felt guilty. I'd apologized. I'd let him sit next to me on this very couch and put his arm around me and tell me how worried he was, how I'd been distant lately, how he wanted to make sure we were okay. And I'd reassured him and promised to make dinner happen the next night instead, and that's when he'd proposed. Spontaneous, he'd called it. Romantic. I'd said yes. Derek. I looked at him straight on. I think we should take a break. His face went through several expressions at once. Shock, anger, calculation. A break? Where is this coming from? I've been thinking what? That you want to throw away 2 years together? 2 years where you borrowed money you never paid back, I thought. Where you forgot your wallet and I paid for dinners. Where you moved half your stuff into my place without asking and never contributed to rent. I think we want different things, I said instead. Different things. He laughed again, that mean edge sharper now. Let me guess. You've been listening to your friends again. Jenna's been in your ear, hasn't she? Telling you can do better? Jenna. I'd lost touch with her by year 2 of my marriage because Derek didn't like how much time I spent with her. She's jealous, he'd always said. She's single and miserable and wants you to be single too. Jenna, who'd tried to warn me, who'd pointed out every red flag I'd ignored. This isn't about Jenna. Then what is it about? He stepped closer. Because I thought we were good. I thought we were building something. You were building something? I thought. I was just the foundation you planned to stand on. I don't think this is working, I said simply. You don't think? He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. Okay, you know what? If you need space, fine. Take a few days. But we're not done, Mira. We're not. He left without kissing me goodbye. I locked the door behind him and exhaled. The next morning, I called my real estate agent. Or rather, the woman who would have been my real estate agent in 3 years. Linda Chen had helped Derek and me buy the house in my first life. She was sharp, no nonsense, and had tried to talk me out of buying a house I couldn't actually afford. I'd ignored her then. Linda Chen, how can I help you? Hi, my name is Mira Santos. I'm looking to buy a house, and I was referred to you by... I scrambled for a name. By the Thompsons? Random guess. Oh, lovely. Yes, I helped them find their place in Maple Heights. What are you looking for? Something small. 2 bedrooms, preferably a bungalow or craftsman style, near downtown if possible. And I'm hoping to find something that needs work, something I can get at a good price. First-time buyer? Yes. Wonderful. FHA loan? Actually, I'd thought about this all night. I'm going to wait on using my FHA eligibility. I'm looking at this as an investment property, so I'll be going conventional. My credit score is 780, and I can put down 10%. A pause. That's very smart. Most first-time buyers burn their FHA eligibility right away and regret it later. Do you have a pre-approval? Not yet. Can you recommend a lender? She could. By the end of the call, I had an appointment with a mortgage broker for the following week. I hung up and stared at my laptop screen, at the spreadsheet I'd been building all morning. This one was different from the mental calculations I'd been doing in the shower. This one had every dollar I'd earn, every investment I'd make, every decision I'd change mapped out for the next 8 years. In my first life, I'd been passive. I'd let things happen to me. I'd trusted Derek to handle our finances, even as he ran them into the ground. I'd stayed in a job I hated because the benefits were good, and Derek said stability was important. In this life, I was going to be strategic. April 2016, the stock market was about to enter one of the longest bull runs in history. Tesla was trading at $40 a share, pre-split. Amazon was at $600. Bitcoin was $420. I had $30,000 in savings, the nest egg I'd built from years of working 2 jobs through college and being careful with money. In my first life, I'd slowly drained it, helping Derek with his emergencies, and then dumped what was left into the down payment for his dream house. This time, that money was going to work for me. Derek started calling again after 3 days. I let them all go to voicemail. He left messages that progressed from apologetic, "Hey, I think we both said things we didn't mean," to frustrated, "Mira, this is childish. Can you just call me back?" to angry, "You know what? Fine. If you don't want to talk, that's your choice. But don't come crying to me later." I didn't plan to. Jenna, when I called her, was suspicious. "You broke up with Derek?" Her voice was cautious, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing and making me defensive. I did. "Can I ask what happened?" "I just realized we weren't right for each other." A long pause. Then, "Oh, thank God." I laughed, surprised by how good it felt. "You really hated him, huh?" "Mira, I was planning an intervention. You've been miserable for months. He treats you like a personal ATM and a therapist, and barely acts like your boyfriend. I've been biting my tongue because I didn't want to be that friend who hates your boyfriend, but you can say it. He was awful. He was the worst." She exhaled. "I'm so relieved. Are you okay? Do you want to come over? I have wine and that documentary about the fire festival you wanted to watch." I did. And for the first time in years, in 2 lifetimes, I spent an evening with my best friend without checking my phone every 5 minutes to see if Derek was annoyed I was gone too long. The house hunt took 2 months. Linda showed me everything in my price range, and I rejected it all. I was waiting for something specific. It appeared on the market on June 3rd. "This one just listed this morning," Linda said over the phone. "It's a 1920s Craftsman, 2-bed, 1-bath. Needs significant work. The kitchen's original, the bathroom hasn't been updated since the 70s, and it needs a new roof. But the bones are good, and the location is perfect. 3 blocks from downtown." It was my house, the one I'd driven past 100 times in my first life, the one I dreamed about while sitting in Derek's suburban McMansion. "I want to see it today." The elderly owner, Miss Chen, no relation to Linda, was moving to a nursing home. Her children lived out of state and wanted a quick sale. The house was listed at $185,000, underpriced for the location, even accounting for the needed repairs. I walked through it like I was visiting an old friend. The hardwood floors needed refinishing, but were solid. The built-in bookshelves in the living room still had their original glass doors. The kitchen was a time capsule, but the layout was good. The bathroom was pink-tiled and cramped, but functional. And the backyard. God, the backyard. 1/4 acre, fenced, with 2 apple trees and a garden shed. "I'll offer asking price," I told Linda. "Cash." She blinked. "Cash? Mira, you told me you were getting a mortgage." I changed my mind. I hadn't, actually. I'd gotten the pre-approval as planned, but I'd also opened a brokerage account and over the past 6 weeks invested my $30,000 in carefully chosen stocks. Not everything, that would have been reckless, but $20,000 had gone into positions I knew would surge. Amazon, Tesla, a few tech companies that would triple in 6 months. And I'd called my mom. That conversation had been harder than breaking up with Derek. In my first life, my relationship with my mother had been strained. She'd never liked Derek, and I'd resented her for it. We'd grown distant. By the time I died, we barely spoke. "Mom, I'd said. I need to tell you something. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I wanted to say I'm sorry for how I've been lately, for not listening to you about Derek. Silence. Then, you broke up with him? I did. Oh, honey. Her voice broke. I'm so glad. I've been so worried. I know. You were right. About everything. We'd talked for 2 hours. At the end, she'd mentioned that she and my father had been planning to help with a down payment on a house someday. We have about $50,000 set aside, she'd said, for when you're ready. In my first life, they'd offered that money. Derek had convinced me to take it for his dream house. We'd burned through it within a year on repairs and furniture. What if I told you I found a house I love? I'd asked. And I want to pay cash for it. Would you consider it a loan? I'll pay you back with interest. Mira, we don't want interest. Please, Mom. Let me do this right. We'd structured it properly. A formal loan agreement, drafted by a lawyer, with a payment plan and a fair interest rate. They'd lent me $50,000, combined with my investments, which had already grown to $28,000, and my remaining savings, I had just enough. Mrs. Chen's children accepted my offer within 24 hours. I closed on July 15th, 2016. The day I got the keys, I sat on the front porch steps and cried. Derek found out through social media. I'd posted a photo, just the front door of my new house, with the caption, New Beginnings. He called 17 times in 1 hour. I answered on the 18th call. You bought a house? His voice was shrill. Without even telling me? We're not together, Derek. I don't owe you updates on my life. We were on a break. No, I broke up with you. You decided it was a break. Mira? He sounded like he was trying to calm down, using his reasonable voice. Okay, I get it. You wanted space, but this is insane. You bought a house by yourself. How are you even affording it? Did you use your FHA loan? There it was, the real question, the real concern. That's none of your business. It is my business. We've been together for 2 years. We've talked about buying a house together. You've talked about it. I never agreed. He sputtered. This is because of your mom, isn't it? She never liked me. She convinced you. Derek, I'm going to hang up now. Wait, can we at least talk? In person? I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. I hung up. He showed up at my new house the next day. I watched him from the window as he got out of his car, the financed BMW he couldn't really afford, and stared at my little bungalow with obvious disdain. I could read his mind from here. Too small, too old, not impressive enough. Perfect. I didn't answer the door. After 10 minutes of knocking and calling my phone, he gave up and left. The renovation took 6 months. I did most of the work myself, learning from YouTube videos and home improvement blogs. Refinished the floors, painted every room, stripped the wallpaper in the bedroom, and found beautiful, original plaster underneath. Slowly, carefully, brought the house back to life. I worked my day job, the accounting position I'd had in my first life, but this time I was paying attention, taking on extra projects, making myself indispensable. I got a raise in October, another in December, and I watched my investments grow. Tesla split and surged. Amazon climbed steadily. By December, my initial $20,000 investment was worth $42,000. I sold half and paid my parents back in full. The rest stayed invested. Jenna helped me paint the kitchen one weekend. We'd grown close again, the way we'd been in college before Derek had slowly isolated me from her. I'm proud of you, she said, rolling pale blue paint onto the cabinet doors we'd sanded down. Like, genuinely. This house is amazing, and you did it all yourself. Not all myself. You're here, aren't you? You know what I mean. You seem different lately. Happier. I am happier. I'm glad you got away from Derek. She glanced at me. Has he tried to contact you? Not in a few months. He'd finally stopped after I'd blocked his number in September. I think he's moved on. Good. You deserve someone who actually appreciates you. I smiled and didn't mention that dating was the last thing on my mind. I was too busy building my life. My real life. The one I should have been living all along. 2017 came in, cold and clear. I hosted New Year's at my house. A small party, just Jenna and a few other friends I'd reconnected with. We drank cheap champagne and played board games, and nobody mentioned Derek once. By February, the house was almost done. New bathroom, still small, but updated and functional. Kitchen with white cabinets and butcher block counters. Refinished floors throughout. I'd kept all the original details, the built-in shelves, the crown molding, the craftsman trim. My portfolio was worth $6,000, and then, in March, I saw the listing. The house Derek had wanted, the massive 4-bedroom in the suburbs, with the 3-car garage and the enormous kitchen and the master suite he'd obsessed over. It was in foreclosure. I pulled up the listing on my laptop, my coffee growing cold as I read the details. The owners had bought at the peak of the market in 2015, stretched themselves too thin, and defaulted when the husband lost his job. The bank wanted it gone. Listed at $380,000, down from the $520,000 the previous owners had paid. In my first life, Derek and I had bought this house in 2018. We'd paid $425,000, with my FHA loan covering most of it. We'd been underwater almost immediately when the market shifted. I called Linda. "That house in Maple Heights," I said. "The foreclosure, can you find out how motivated the bank is? Are you looking to buy another property already?" "Maybe, as an investment." The bank was very motivated. They'd had the house for 8 months. They wanted it off their books. I offered $320,000 all cash, quick close. They accepted. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. Not Jenna, not my parents, not Linda, beyond the basics. I closed on the Maple Heights house in April 2017. Then I listed it for rent at $20,800 a month. Below market rate for the area, but enough to cover the property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, with some left over. The house rented in 2 weeks. To a young couple with a baby. The husband worked in tech. The wife was a nurse. They were responsible, grateful, and treated my investment property like it was their own. Everything Derek had wanted, the dream house, the garage for his toys, the investment in our future, was now mine. And I was profiting from it. I ran into Derek in August, downtown at the farmer's market. I was picking up tomatoes from my favorite vendor when I heard his voice. "Mira?" I turned. He looked diminished somehow. Still handsome, still well-dressed, but there was something defeated in his eyes. "Derek, hi. I didn't know you came to the farmer's market. Every Saturday?" I'd come here in my first life, too, before we'd bought the house in the suburbs and it became too far to bother. "Right. Cool." He shifted his weight. "You look good. Really good." "Thanks." I didn't return the compliment. "So I heard, through the grapevine, that you bought a house?" "I did." "That's great. Really great." He didn't sound like he thought it was great. Must be nice to have family money for a down payment. I could have corrected him, could have explained that I'd paid cash, that my parents' loan had been a small part of it, that I'd mostly funded it through smart investing, but I didn't owe him an explanation. "It worked out," I said simply. "Yeah." He laughed, bitter. "Some of us aren't that lucky. I've been trying to buy for 2 years now, but my credit's still shot. Can't qualify for anything decent." I knew that already. I'd checked his credit report, not to be creepy, but because I wanted to know if my timeline was still accurate. It was. He'd financed a motorcycle last year, missed payments, tanked his score even further. "That's tough," I said, meaning none of it. "You know, I've been thinking." He stepped closer. "About us. About how things ended. I think I could have handled it better. Derek, I'm just saying, I've grown a lot in the past year. I've been working on myself. And I miss you. I miss what we had. What we had. A relationship where I paid for everything and you criticized everything, and I slowly lost myself." "I'm seeing someone," I lied. "It's pretty serious." His face fell. "Oh, I didn't know. Why would you?" I handed the vendor cash for my tomatoes. "Take care, Derek." I walked away before he could respond. By the end of 2017, my life looked nothing like my first life. I'd been promoted to senior accountant. My salary was $85 million, more than I'd ever made before dying. My investment portfolio had grown to $125,000. My house was fully paid off, worth approximately $240,000 now that I'd renovated it. My rental property was generating passive income and appreciating in value. I was 25 years old and well on my way to financial independence. In my first life, I'd been engaged to Derek, miserable, and slowly sinking into debt. I started dating in 2018, casually. Nice men who treated me well and didn't see me as a resource to exploit. Nothing serious. I wasn't ready for serious, but it felt good to remember that I deserved respect. Jenna got engaged to her girlfriend in March. I was her maid of honor. At the wedding, dancing with people who actually liked me, I felt so far removed from the life I'd left behind that it almost seemed like a dream. Almost. The market crashed in March 2020, just like I knew it would. I'd prepared, sold off 60% of my positions in February, locked in gains, held cash. When everything tanked, I bought back in at the bottom. Tesla at $90 a share, post-split. Amazon at $1,800. Zoom, which I'd been tracking since 2019, at $120. My parents thought I was psychic. "How did you know?" my dad asked over video chat. "Everyone's losing their shirts and you're buying?" "Just lucky timing," I said. By December 2020, my portfolio was worth $380,000. I paid off my parents' mortgage as a Christmas gift. They cried. Derek resurfaced in 2021. He sent me a Facebook message. "Hey, I know this is out of the blue, but I'm in a tough spot, and I remembered you have that rental property. Any chance you have a vacancy coming up? I'd be a great tenant, and I could really use a break on the deposit." I stared at the message for a long time. In my first life, at this point in the timeline, Derek had just lost his job. The company he'd been with for 5 years had downsized. He'd struggled to find work, blown through his savings, and we'd nearly lost the house. I'd picked up extra shifts, borrowed from my parents again, sacrificed everything to keep us afloat while he complained about how unfair it all was. I checked his profile. He was still in sales, but at a different company. No mention of a girlfriend or a wife. I typed, "The rental property is occupied with long-term tenants. Best of luck with your search." I blocked him before he could respond. In 2022, I bought my third property, a small duplex near the university. I paid cash, renovated it myself over 60 months, and rented both units to grad students. Cash flow, $1,300 a month. My portfolio broke $600,000 in November. I was 30 years old, owned 3 properties outright, and had more money than I'd ever imagined in my first life. And then, in December, I saw the listing that made me laugh out loud. The house in Maple Heights, Derek's dream house, my rental property, was for sale again. Not from me, from the bank. My tenants had bought a house of their own and moved out in October. I'd been about to list it for rent when I got curious and drove by. There was a for sale sign in the yard. Bank owned, foreclosure. I called Linda. "What happened to the house next door to my rental?" She pulled up the records. "Looks like the owner bought it in 2019, defaulted in 21, and the foreclosure just finalized. Poor guy. Bought at the peak, couldn't keep up with payments, lost everything. Do you have a name?" She did. Derek Lawson. I pulled the full story from public records. Derek had finally bought his dream house in March 2019. He'd used a subprime mortgage. His credit had improved just enough, with a 7% interest rate and a tiny down payment. He'd stretched himself impossibly thin, just like I knew he would. Then COVID hit. He'd lost his job in the first wave of layoffs in April 2020, couldn't find work for 8 months, burned through his savings, started missing mortgage payments. He'd tried to short sell in 21. The bank rejected the offer. Foreclosure proceedings began. In November 22, the bank took the house. The listing price, $295,000. I'd bought the identical house next door for $320,000 in 2017. It was now worth $450,000, conservatively. This one, Derek's former dream house, needed work. He'd deferred maintenance, probably because he couldn't afford it. The roof was bad. The kitchen appliances were cheap replacements. The yard was overgrown. I called Linda. I want to buy it. Mira, you already have a rental property on that street. I know, I want them both. I offered $280,000. The bank countered at $290,000. We settled at $285,000. I closed in January 2023. Then I renovated it. Spent $40,000, bringing it up to the same standard as my other rental. New roof, updated kitchen, fresh paint, professional landscaping. Listed it for rent at $300 a month. It rented in a week. I now owned both houses on that cul-de-sac. The street Derek had dreamed of living on, the neighborhood he'd obsessed over, was mine. I found out later, through a mutual acquaintance, that Derek had moved back in with his parents after the foreclosure. He was 31, working a job he hated, rebuilding his credit from scratch. Again, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, nothing. He'd made his choices, just like I'd made mine. In March 2025, I bought my dream house. Not a rental property, not an investment. My actual dream house. It was a restored Victorian near the historic district, built in 1890. 3 bedrooms, original stained glass windows, a wraparound porch, and a garden that was practically an arboretum. The previous owner had been a master gardener who'd spent 40 years cultivating roses, peonies, Japanese maples. It was listed at $675,000. I offered $650,000, all cash. The seller accepted. I sold my little craftsman bungalow, the house that had saved me, the house that had been my fresh start, for $320,000, 3 times what I'd paid for it 9 years earlier. I moved into the Victorian in May, 2 months after my 33rd birthday. The closing fell on May 15th, 9 years and 1 month after I'd broken up with Derek. 8 years and 10 months after I'd bought my first house with cash. 8 years after I'd bought his dream house out of foreclosure and turned it into my investment property. I hosted a housewarming party in June. Jenna and her wife came, my parents came, friends I'd made over the years, people who knew me as successful, independent, happy. We drank wine on the wraparound porch and watched the sunset turn the stained glass windows into kaleidoscopes of color. How does it feel? Jenna asked. Living in your dream house? I thought about my first life. The water-stained ceiling, the medication I couldn't afford, the house I'd hated, bought with the loan Derek had talked me into using. I thought about my FHA loan eligibility, still intact, unused. I'd never needed it. I'd built everything without it. It feels like winning, I said. I ran into Derek one last time in August 2025. I was at Home Depot, buying supplies for a garden project, when I saw him in the checkout line. He looked older than 33, tired. He was buying spackling paste and cheap paint. He saw me before I could slip away. Mira. He seemed genuinely shocked. Wow. Hi. Hi, Derek. I heard someone told me you bought that big Victorian on Cascade Street. Is that true? It is. He let out a low whistle. That place must have cost a fortune. It was worth it. Yeah, I bet. He gestured at his cart. I'm just fixing up a room at my parents' place. Living at home at 33? Pretty pathetic, right? I could have been kind. Could have said something encouraging. Instead, I said, "You're still renting then?" Yeah, can't qualify for a mortgage yet. My credit's still recovering from... He trailed off. From some bad decisions a few years back? That's tough, I said, the same meaningless phrase I'd used in 2017. You know what's crazy? He laughed, but it was hollow. I always thought we'd buy a house together someday. I had this whole vision, big place in the suburbs, room for kids, the whole American dream. I remember, I found the perfect house, exactly what I wanted, fought like hell to buy it. And then I lost everything. He met my eyes. Meanwhile, you just kept winning. I could have told him then, could have explained that I hadn't just kept winning, that I died in his dream house, miserable and broke, and been given a second chance to choose differently. That every decision I'd made had been a direct response to every mistake he'd pushed me into making the first time around. That his dream house, the one he'd lost to foreclosure, was currently renting for $3,100 a month. And I was the one collecting the checks. But I didn't owe him the story. I didn't owe him anything. Life works out the way it's supposed to, I said. Take care, Derek. I left him standing there with his spackling paste and walked out to my car, the paid-off Tesla Model 3 I'd bought in 2023. I'm 33 years old now, the age I was when I died in my first life. I own 4 properties outright, worth a combined $1.8 million. My investment portfolio just crossed $900,000. I make 6 figures from my job, plus another $8,000 a month from rental income. My FHA loan eligibility? Still there, still unused. I never needed the government's help to build my empire. Derek is 33 too, living with his parents, recovering from his second credit catastrophe, still dreaming of the house he lost, the house I now own and rent out at a profit. Sometimes I drive past the Maple Heights properties, my matching rentals side by side on that pristine cul-de-sac, and think about the parallel lives we lived. In one timeline, I let him use my FHA eligibility. I sacrificed my financial future for his dreams. I died young and poor in a house I hated. In this timeline, I said no. I built my own empire. I bought his dream house when he lost it. I bought my dream house with cash. The revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. I didn't confront him. I didn't gloat. I just won. And every month, when the rent checks clear, when my investment statements arrive, when I wake up in my Victorian dream house surrounded by stained glass and century-old roses, I remember the best revenge is living well, and I'm living extraordinarily well. Last week, I got a message from an unknown number. Mira, this is Derek. I know you blocked me everywhere, but I got a new phone. I heard you're doing really well, and I'm genuinely happy for you. I was an idiot back when we were together. I didn't appreciate you, and I took advantage. I've been in therapy, and I'm working on myself. I know I have no right to ask, but I'm trying to buy a house again, and I was wondering if you might be willing to co-sign a mortgage with me.
Good.
I'd pay everything, obviously.
That would be
I just
fun.
need
Just a
someone
random
with good
D20
credit
roll.
to help me qualify.
Anyone can do
We have
it.
history, and I thought
That's
maybe
cool.
the
You have
message
to know
went
your
on for 3 more
modifiers, though. You have
paragraphs,
to know your stats.
explaining his situation,
I suppose.
promising
But as
he
a base
changed,
check, it would
asking
be
for
fine.
one more chance. I read it twice.
Okay. what
Then
the
I
hell?
blocked the
Okay,
new
there's, like,
number and
fences
deleted the
and shit
message.
here.
Some people never learn, but I did. And I built a fortune from the lesson.
Who are you? I know all my stats. I need to roll my own personal stats, don't I? I'm thinking about like character stats, but actually I should just have my own. I should know. That's an oversight, frankly, on my part. I named my anger. Most streamers probably require at least a 13 in charisma, like when multi-classing. Right. Some do okay with lower, but I feel like stream, like public charisma and stream charisma maybe are different stats. I don't know. Right. No time to draw any breasts. Oh, what a shame. That's great. Cool kids. Vinny redeemed great tits. How timely, Vinny. Well done. Oh my god. You should all have points now. If there are things it had to be done. Uh-huh. I've redeemed boobies. The roll didn't work. Damn it. Okay. Unrelated. What? Oh, this song. It's Echoes. It's so fucking good. It's so good. This is the song. It's Echoes, Hybrid Minds. It's a banger. I love the idea of someone being like, I need to see some big titty vampires. It's not for me, for my kid. No, I actually do believe that's for the kid. I need to make the images smaller files. Ah, interesting. Like the file that it's pulling from. Stream elements. Prick. Motherfucker. Fuck. Shit. Fuck. Roll 20. We'll just keep trying. Does it need to be given permission to post that kind of thing? 1d4. That's also good. Roll Tide. Just kidding, not a shithead. Wow. Only in the good way. Yes. Shinobi is amazing. Amazing. Make a list. I'll roll everyone. I played as one of my favorite characters that I played as was a monk. A gnome monk.
And her name was Mim, and she talked like this, and she was not very good at talking to people, but she was an extremely good fighter.
Let's go. Oh my god. Omerta, what the hell? You're amazing. Wow. Darn. Oh, plus, let's see. D100. No. D20? Ah, fuck, I got a 10. Okay, now your turn, Mayhem. Oh. I know it's just tape overflow. I'm getting beach to grass vibes. Oh.